For those just joining us on the recording, hello again and welcome to the 2025 National Survey of Villages Launch Party and Info Session, hosted by the Hub for Aging Collaboration at the Rutgers School of Social Work and the Village to Village Network. The purpose of today's event is to convene village leaders to launch a new national project surveying as many operational villages as possible to expand our shared understanding of the village movement as it is in 2025. We will start things off today with welcoming remarks from Barbara Sullivan of Village to Village Network, VtVN, followed by an in-depth overview of the background, nuts and bolts, and followed by an in-depth overview of the background and nuts and bolts of the 2025 National Survey of Villages presented by Dr. Emily Greenfield of the Rutgers Hub for Aging Collaboration. Bill Kincaid of VtVN will then provide a call to action for the survey, and we will hear from several village leaders who were integral to the pilot phase of our project, including Anita Light of Fairfax Village in the City, Suzanne Francis of Village Commons of Rhode Island, and Carolyn Ross of Village Movement California. They will speak about their experiences and perspectives on this exciting new project. We will then move into a large group discussion before wrapping things up. We are thrilled by the excitement and interest in today's event from village leaders and friends from across the United States and beyond. We have over 145 unique villages spanning 30 states across the U.S. represented in today's registration. For a project that aims to engage villages across the U.S. and everything in between, the national interest displayed through the registration for today's event is showing that we're already off to a strong start, so thank you today. It is now my pleasure to hand over our virtual mic to Barbara Sullivan, Executive Director of VtVN, for welcoming remarks. Barbara.
First of all, a very big thank you to Natalie and Emily and Rutgers Hub for Aging Collaboration. Terrific work, and we just are so thankful that you are as excited as we are with this project and the survey coming out. Next slide. Next slide. Okay, there we are. Village to Village Network. We are the national voice of the village movement. Next slide, please. And we are very excited that this is 25 years of the movement. Yes, in 2000, so celebrating 25 years of, the village model, started as a concept, and now we are an aging model across the country and in multiple countries. Next slide. I would also like to very much thank the Data and Evaluation Committee members whose thought leadership and continued support for this and other data, surveys and how we can further to next steps. It's truly an honor to work with all of these folks, and we thank you deeply. I want to stress to all the villages out there, and right now we are at 160 folks, that this is not just the national network and village to village network villages, but villages across the country. Whether you're within the network, we want to hear from you. We want to know what you're doing in your community. It's so vitally important. And then the next slide, please. Last but not least, I would be remiss if I did not thank our board of directors, Bill Kincaid, our Vice President Kim Greer, Hillary Simmons, Lee Semples, Aaron Mabasi, Velma Carter-Dreyer, Isabel Friesholm, Jennifer Hanley, Chris Howery, Brittany Kearney, Julie Schoen, B.T. Thomas, Larry Toy, and Wendy Zinker. Thank you all so much for your support. And I will turn it now over to Emily Greenfield, who is the director at Rutgers Hub for Aging Collaboration. Thank you, Emily.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, Barbara, and everyone for being here this afternoon or morning, depending on your time zone. It's such a thrill to bring together village leaders from across the United States to have this virtual party, a celebration, and a launch, an information session about this project that's been in the works for a couple of months now actively, but really years in the making. So I'm going to go over the background for the project, as well as nuts and bolts information on what to expect for villages who are able to participate, which we hope all of you will say yes. So this project origins actually goes back to more than a decade ago. In 2012, I was part of a cross-institutional team, still at Rutgers in New Jersey, with colleagues at UC Berkeley, and we designed a small grant-funded project, research project, to conduct the first ever national survey of both villages and NORC supportive service programs, which at that time were kind of like a cousin to the villages, and a lot of national interest in that model as well. The Berkeley team went ahead and thank you to the villages who were part of that inaugural survey and then who participated again. In 2016, the Berkeley team went ahead and conducted another round of the national survey. And that is the last time that we have done that a national survey of villages, kind of about villages and all their variety and how they operate as organizations, was conducted. Between 2016 and now, of course, Rutgers, RAND, and Village to Village Network partnered on a multi-year project with support from the Patient-Centered Outcomes Research Institute. That is the Engaging Villages as Key Partners for Healthy Aging Research, which was designed to really facilitate careful national dialogue on how villages have promise for promoting healthy aging outcomes and what we need to do as a movement to enhance our capacity to further that kind of outcomes research. And we learned a ton in that process. And thank you to so many of you here today who are part of that project as well, that really there's this foundational need to get an up-to-date, refreshed national portfolio of what villages are doing and how they're set up in this moment in time. And so we together, Village to Village Network and Rutgers, relaunched the VtVN Data and Evaluation Committee, and as a group, kind of late winter into earlier spring, earlier this year, we made the decision to go ahead and put our whatever resources we have to be able to bring to this into conducting a national survey of villages. And here we are on August 5th, 2025, again, after months of piloting, discussion, meetings to get the questionnaire just right, the plans in place, how it's going to work, ready for you all to go ahead and sign up to participate and build this essential knowledge together. So we'll do next slide. I'll just ask if our co-hosts, okay, hold on. Okay, great. All right. So if you would like further background, this slide has a screenshot of the landing page of our villagesresearch.org website, which was launched as part of that prior PCORI-funded project on engaging villages as key partners for healthy aging research. And you can see on this image, the 2025 Survey of Villages is the second option under the banner at the top, and that's the project information page where we'll continue to update information about the current project, but you can also learn about prior projects and other publications and reports on research and evaluation with villages. So next slide. Okay, so yes, as stated, this slide provides kind of the beginning of a discussion of why now and why this ask. So as described prior, the last National Survey of Villages was conducted just about 10 years ago. And you can imagine how different the world looks, how different the village movement looks. We know the movement has grown and evolved considerably since everything that has transpired over the past 10 years. And I want to provide one example of many of ways in which we hypothesize that villages and the movement have changed. I'm going to preface this by saying in 2012, when that first national survey was conducted, 69 villages were participated. And that, I think that was pretty close to the number of villages that were in operation in 2012. In 2016, there were 155 identified villages as eligible for participation. Fun fact, 115 responded to that survey, which is about a 74% response rate, which is really great. So there are 155 villages identified in 2016. So the question, we can go to the next slide. How many operational villages do we think are out there today? And Natalie, I don't know if you can go ahead and launch that poll question. Okay, it popped up. Great. So there's a poll and it asks approximately how many operational villages are out there today. The first response is who knows, question mark, exclamation point. Next is 250 or less. The next is 325. The next option is 375. And the next option is 500 or more. Oh, and the final option is it's not possible to count. Okay, so we see your responses coming in. Thank you for participating in our poll. Excellent. So people's best estimate of how many villages, operational villages, are out there today. Amazing. We got 75% of our participants responding, which is great. Some in the chat. Great. Okay, we'll give another 5 seconds before we close it out and share with you. Okay, so we'll end the poll and share the results. And so we see the most popular response is 325 villages, followed by 375, 250 or less, 500 more. Those are all kind of similar in their popularity. We got a couple who knows or it's not possible to count. Actually, according to our best estimates, the best estimate we got is 375 villages, which is super interesting because we often hear people talk around like the 300 number, but we, as our research team, were able to kind of collate different lists of villages that are out there and cross-check them with website searches and social media searches. And we think there are about 375 operational villages today. That number kind of depends a little bit how you count, especially as it concerns villages that self-identify as hub and spoke arrangements. Do you count that as one village or multiple villages? So it's a squishy number, but that gives you a sense of just how much the movement has grown and how much we have yet to learn about the vast number of villages that are out there and everything that they're up to. Okay, so we'll stop sharing that and go back to the slide deck. So next slide. All right, so we could have a long conversation, and we have as a VtVN Data and Evaluation Committee about why the findings from the survey are going to be so mission critical for all of our efforts in so many different ways. Of course, these up-to-date data are essential for planning, for funding, for conducting outreach on behalf of villages, for future research, evaluation, advocacy, communications. And it's not just the variety of ways in which these findings can be applied, but the vastness of the number of constituent groups within the village movement who might benefit from having these data points. This includes every single individual village that wants to, amplify its messaging on how this work at the hyperlocal level is part of something much bigger, can benchmark themselves in terms of how they're set up compared to modal trends in the industry. Regional catalysts, we have a ton of wonderful work happening at the state and regional levels to advance the movement. This will be very helpful for those efforts. And of course, the national movement and the increasingly global interest in villages as well. So next slide. Okay, so this comes from the Engaging Villages in Healthy Aging Outcomes research. And this was a kind of the bottom line insight, what we learned from that 2-year project and a lot of national conversation on capacity building within the village movement for collaborative research and evaluation. And we kind of distilled it down to these 4 buckets of like what conditions must be in place to have a high likelihood of success with data and evaluation projects with villages. And just want to note, this project hits all 4 buckets, which makes us feel like now is a great time, that there should be readiness and feasibility to do this with villages in all of their variety. You can imagine like villages vary in their setup, in their human capital, in their capacity to respond to additional requests like completing a survey questionnaire. And so we've really tried to design this survey in a way that is going to work at the national scale for a really wide swath of villages. So just kind of keeping that in mind. So first of all, and you can click next here, Natalie, as I go along. So understanding and motivation for research. So this project to do a national survey with villages, to have this up-to-date information, came up repeatedly in so many conversations of people saying what we really need is to understand, how many villages are set up like this, or how many villages are out there, or how many villages have this type of membership program, right? So there's a lot of motivation around the specific questions that this survey can answer. Next one is partnerships. So yeah, I mean, as a national project, it wouldn't be possible to do this with any one. It doesn't make sense to do this one region at a time or one village at a time. Really, to design a questionnaire and ask all villages across the United States, um, to be able to do this in partnership with each other, I think is the optimal way to go about building this knowledge together. Next one is theorizing village interventions and programs. So we can hit next. Um, we can understand enough about how villages are set up and what they aspire to do to be able to design a questionnaire that hopefully will make sense to villages at the national level. And then finally, data systems and research protocols, which is going to be the focus of my next slides. We've done a really careful job to the best we can to make it as efficient and burden-free for villages to respond to questions that should be relatively straightforward and easy to get that data back to our research team to be used for a variety of purposes, which I'll also explain further. So we can go on to the next slide. Okay, so this slide says, what does the survey ask about? And there's kind of this balancing scales image on it. And on one side of the scale is we want meaningful data. We want enough depth and nuance in the data to be able to draw meaningful conclusions. But then on the other side of the scale is the concern for survey burden. So we didn't want to have it be so long that no one would ever complete it, or so complicated that people would feel like they're splitting hairs and trying to give good responses to the questions. So that was kind of the principle of what we were trying to balance in our design of it. And around the scale, there's the words, kind of the topical areas that the survey questionnaire covers. So questions about village setup and structure, what services, programs, and events, around staffing and leadership, budget size, partnerships, information about number of members, participants, and volunteers, and then some questions about key operations as well. So those are the high-level topical areas. And again, we designed it to be relevant for villages across the entire United States. So there is a high likelihood that some questions aren't going to be relevant to some villages. So there's a lot of skip patterns, which I'll explain further. And also to say that we want the questions to be able to capture what villages are actually doing. None of the questions are meant to imply what we believe villages should be doing. It's a descriptive study. We ask about these things because we believe they're likely relevant to a lot of villages, but not to imply that, there's a better answer or that people should be saying yes to something or the numbers should be higher. Again, agnostic. We just want to be able to understand what villages are like in this historical moment. So next slide. Okay, so some sample questions. So these are just screenshots of the survey questionnaire. I'm not going to go through the whole thing for the sake of time here, but just to give you a sense of what it looks like. So this is a screenshot of some early questions on the village setup. So like an example, a basic question. Does your village offer a membership program? By membership program, we mean that individuals formally join the village by application or sign up, regardless of dues structures, application form length, etc. Yes or no? And then another question after that is, does your village provide services through members, volunteers, or staff to help people one-on-one upon request? By staff, we mean people with paid time allocated to the village. For example, a contract employee, consultant on the village payroll, etc. Yes or no? We can go on to the next one. Here's some questions about village under the topic of.
Let me.
Oh, hold on a moment. Under village programs and services. So this is one of the grids specifically around villages providing help with rides and errands. So the STEM is, in the past year, has your village offered the following through its volunteers, who might also be members or staff, so provided by volunteers or staff. And so the listed items here are rides for healthcare appointments, rides for other non-healthcare purposes, healthcare errands on behalf of a member, like a prescription pickup, or non-medical errands on behalf of a member, like food shopping or other errands. Again, it's a yes, no question. Yep, we've offered at least one type of service in this category, or no, we haven't offered any type of service in this category. Next slide. Okay, and this is the last sample question slide, but just to give you a sense, the question asks about partnerships. So this is at the end, we ask about ways that villages might be partnering with a variety of other types of organizations. Again, this is a yes, no. Please indicate whether or not your village has partnered with each of the following entities over the past 12 months. And you can see the list like home health agency, area agency on aging, senior center. And then if yes, ask for a brief description of the ways that you have partnered in this past year. So next slide. Okay.
Emily, can you just, one of the questions real quick is define a partnership, define what they.
Oh, yeah. So before that grid in the questionnaire itself, we have an introduction to that section that says, now we're going to ask you about partners. Please mark whether you've partnered or not. Here are, I think we have maybe like 9 bullet points of like, here are some examples of ways in which villages partner with other organizations. And actually those bullet points are based on pilot responses that we got. So they're from village leaders themselves who've already filled out this questionnaire saying how they've partnered. And we've identified those patterns from those responses to come up with that list to help, people think through the question and whether they want to mark yes or no. Yes. Yeah. So, and I see another chat too about each village would respond once to the national survey. We would not be sending it out to our members. Thank you so much for asking that clarifying question. 100%, this is a survey of villages as an organizational entity. It's possible in the future, it would be great to do some kind of national survey of village members, but that is not the project we're doing in this moment in time. Responses really should be about the village at the organizational level. It's not a survey of your members embedded within the organization or program of the village. So thank you for that question. Okay, so eligibility. So this is an important one. And I appreciate we might have villages here that are still in development, and just as a village core team member in my own community that was in development until we launched in April 1st. Totally understand there's tons of interesting things to ask villages in development. We made a decision to not include villages in development in this survey because the questions would just probably be pretty different. It would be very hard to answer a lot of the questions because you just haven't launched yet. So like questions about how many members do you have? Well, we haven't launched yet, so we don't have members, for example. That's just like one of several examples where we're like, this is like apples and oranges. So for this round, we're including any operational village. So for villages that have a membership program, this is straightforward in the sense that your membership is open and you've accepted your first member. That's what we're considering an open or operational village. For villages that do not have a membership program, we're going to let those villages kind of self-identify as operational when they understand themselves to be, they're out of their planning phase and they're offering the benefits that they intend to provide. So if a non-membership village says we are no longer in the planning phase, we've launched and we're providing all of our intended benefits, then you would be considered an operational village and we would ask you kindly to proceed with the survey. I see another question in the chat of do they have to be incorporated as a 501c3 to participate? Thank you for that question. So no, absolutely not. And in fact, we're really intentional in designing questions for villages of other types. We have a question in the survey early on that asks people, are you a freestanding village or are you embedded within another organization? Are you a grassroots informal network or something else? And you can proceed through the whole survey regardless of whether what response you check for that question. Okay, so as I think we've said in the introductory comments, villages do not have to be a member of the Village to Village network to participate in this project. We really want to see villages and all of their connection points, anyone who identifies with the movement, participate. Any geography or country, we did design the survey to focus on the United States, but if there are villages outside the United States that would like to respond, we welcome that. And hub and spoke villages can also participate, but there's a special caveat that, next slide, sorry, that we need to kind of discuss it one-on-one how to participate if you're part of a hub and spoke arrangement. So in some cases, it will make sense for every individual spoke village to complete the questionnaire. In other cases, it will only make sense for the centralized administrative unit to respond on behalf of the hub and spoke village. We've learned through piloting that it's really important to clarify that decision point up front and then proceed with responding rather than having some kind of generic version for hub and spoke. So we'll go for the sake of time to the next question. All right. So, right, design for villages and their many, many permutations. There's so many examples that came up during the pilot phase where we're just completely humbled by like, oh, of course, that makes sense that there could be a difference. So just recently, there's questions around staffing, and one of the pilot villages is embedded within a larger nonprofit organization. And of course, their larger nonprofit organization supports the village, but like, how would you, count that in terms of FTE? So adding an additional language of like, give us your best estimate of how much of their time is dedicated to the village in a typical month or typical week. Another thing that came up consistently was this language around volunteers and members. Some, villages consider all of their volunteers a member. Some consider all of their members volunteers, but we're really trying to think about like in the capacity of you are a volunteer with the village and in the capacity of like member through the membership program. Like I've joined the village as a village member and really trying to get that language down. It's just, it's been a lot of work, but we're hopefully at a good place where it'll be clear. And if people are confused, of course, they can ask for clarification further too. So we just want to encourage all participants, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good, right? Like just do your best to respond to the best of your ability. Try to consider the concepts, not the specific term that your village might use, but really like we use this term, other villages might use this term, but the question is getting at this. Lots of skip patterns. So when you see the questionnaire, it will look long, but actually you should be able to go through it pretty quickly because the questionnaire has a lot of questions you skip if it's not relevant to your village. So for example, if your village doesn't have a standard membership fee, there's a whole page of the survey you skip. You don't answer those questions. So kind of keeping that in mind. And again, this idea of no judgment. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so yep, one survey response per one village. We do recommend designating a kind of lead person to serve as the main point person for gathering the information, collecting it, and submitting it on behalf of the village. Although we do understand that because it asks a lot of different things, knowledge is distributed across the team. So we also encourage you to work as a team to respond to the questionnaire as well. And we'll go to the next slide. That is part of the reason why we've designed many ways for villages to complete, many ways to compete. It should be many ways to complete. Sorry for that typo. Complete the questionnaire. So we really want to meet villages where they're at whatever system makes the most sense for them. That's what they can do to get the responses to us. And so here, we can give you a Microsoft Word worksheet as an attachment, which can be printed out and completed by hand, or it could be saved on your computer, and that file lives with the filled out responses and then emailed back as an attachment. We also have a Google Doc worksheet, so that's especially important for villages that want to do this collaboratively and share the document and have different people in it and working. We also have a survey link, like you can go straight into our online survey platform that will have the skip patterns programmed in, and it's a unique link so you can come back to it through your web browser. And then also villages are welcome to request an appointment to meet with a member of our team, and we'll sit with you by Zoom for about an hour and have a lovely conversation and go through it together and mark your responses as we go along. Next slide. Okay, so, wait, I'm sorry, go back one more. We estimate that it will take villages a quick half an hour, on the longer side, an hour to complete the survey. It's just an estimate. We really don't know because villages have such different setups of how they work and their administration. So it's really just an estimate, but we've designed the survey to take no longer than an hour. We really hope that this can be done within an hour's time. Okay, next. Okay, yeah, so maybe for the sake of time, I'm going to go through this pretty quickly, but we can come back, and I see there's an active chat, so we'll get back to the questions too. So the first thing we'll do is we'll ask people to complete a sign me up form. So Natalie, you can go to the next slide. So we are going to be sharing this in the chat as well as through you could do the QR code if you have your phone ready. This is basically like we raise our hands as a village and we're ready to, receive the questionnaire in some form. We can go on to the next slide. Okay. So once we get your sign up information, we'll email you with whatever your preferred mode of responding is. And then we'll ask you to complete the questionnaire within 2 weeks. So next slide. And we will be in touch and send reminders about give 2 weeks, work it into your workflow to complete it and return it in 2 weeks. And then next slide. We'll review your responses and we'll follow up with any questions of clarification and also give you a PDF copy of your responses that you can use for your own purposes. Next slide. We hope to give a project update, maybe even some preliminary findings, depending on how things go at the VtVN National Gathering at the end of September. So next slide. Okay, so how will the data be used and accessed? Well, first of all, the village you provide is your village's data, so you'll have that and be able to use it however you see fit. It will also be accessible by Village to Village Network and Rutgers as project administrators. We also plan to have an optional public registry of villages with some very limited data points from the questionnaire to be made available publicly through Village to Village Network, and villages can opt in or out. We ask at the end, like, do you want to be included in the public registry? So that's not a prerequisite for participation. And then we will prepare mini data sets for geographic networks of villages. So like, for example, Village Movement California with Carolyn Ross, who's going to speak pretty shortly, will receive a mini data set with all the responses from the California villages specifically as one example. So next slide. Yeah, so lots of ideas on future projects. Just want, to make it clear, expectations. This isn't the end all be all project. This is the one that the group feels makes the most sense for this historical moment. So this slide has a couple of ideas for future projects that could kind of be spin-offs after this national endeavor is completed. Next slide. So just quickly, as Isaac Newton, if I've seen the future further than others, it is by standing upon the shoulders of giants, and this project certainly is in that spirit. So next slide, and my last slide, is just a huge thank you to the about dozen villages that participated as pilot participants. They're listed on the slide, for example, Little Help, Arlington Neighborhood Villages, Village of Chicago, Westside Pacific Villages, etc. Really just want to thank them for pioneering this endeavor with us and getting us ready to unleash the survey to everybody else. So thank you. And with that, next slide, I'll hand it over to Bill Kincaid to offer some reflections from Village to Village Network.
Great, thanks, Emily. I want to thank everybody who has helped us get to this point and all those who are going to help us get to the finish line here. There's a lot of work that still needs to be done in the next 4 months. So it's been 10 years since the last in-depth look at villages, and we really need better information now on how villages have changed and grown if we're going to really plan well for the movement's future. The last 5 years have seen many changes in the age-friendly ecosystem and in the village movement. Those years have brought a new understanding of the role that villages play as member-driven, locally governed, not-for-profit organizations that serve their members in a variety of ways. We've all changed and grown, and now is the time we need more descriptive information on how villages have evolved and how they operate. Village to Village Network is the largest and oldest national organization representing the village movement. This first slide is a thumbnail sketch of what the national network is currently doing. Our traditional role has been mentoring new villages, growing and reinforcing existing villages, and increasing partnering and networking opportunities for our villages. But we've also, over the last couple of years, ventured into new areas, research, as Emily mentioned, on the PCORI project, and also advocacy, which we think is extremely important, particularly in this day and age. I want to stress that the Village to Village Network is not the village movement. There are now numerous state and regional organizations that work to help the village movement move the village movement forward. So both Village Movement California and the Washington Area Village Exchange have been great partners and have helped to grow and support villages in a variety of different ways. The hub and spoke villages have been very important as well. And there are new groups present as well. The Village Support Network up in Montgomery County has been helping to mentor villages and incubate villages. And those are the components of the movement. It's not just, so this survey is not about our network, the national organization. It's about all of us, and that's how the information is going to be used. So many of the village-to-village board members have been working with states to improve the networking and advocacy efforts about the country, and we think those areas are extremely important. So, as I mentioned, the village-to-village network, the village movement is 25 years old. VtVN is about 15 years old, and developing new relationship has been extremely important. So we are all about now getting better descriptive information on the villages. Many times at the national meetings, we've been asked very simple questions. How many total individuals are in your villages? We really don't have the capacity to answer that now. So we don't know how big the villages are and how our extent reaches into the country. This data will help us get that information. How are villages governed? How have their business models changed over time, particularly during the stressors of the pandemic? So we need to know more about the social programming and the service delivery that villages are offering, and that's the information that this survey will help us gather. So if we're going to really position villages in the changing environment and the huge changes that are going to occur over the next 25 years, the demographic shift, we really need to know more about what villages are doing and how they're constructed. So the other issue that I think is really critical for us is using this information in our advocacy work. The changes at the federal level have, I think, cast a very chilly wind on what the future is for many elderly Americans, and we need to work more closely together on these advocacy efforts. This information will help us all at the local, regional, state, and national level on those efforts. So we think this information is extremely important to us. Next slide. So one of the greatest strengths, I think, the village movement is our networking, our partnering, and our convening capacities that we perform at both the national level, state and local, regional levels, and also the individual levels. So this data is extremely important. We need to know more about each other as we work together to build our place in the age-friendly ecosystem. Next slide. So what are these new interfaces that we need to be dealing with? We need to look not only internally at how we partner with ourselves, but we also need to look externally at partnering with some other important interfaces for the villages. Medical systems, governments at both the local, state, and federal level, philanthropic organizations that can help us expand our services and extend our village reach, the housing community, CCRCs, nursing homes, the missing middle group, all of these are going to be important. Research partners, so we can better establish the outcomes that villages are able to achieve, and also working with other home and community-based service organizations is going to be important as well. So next slide. So the task and the ask. So we need more information on the village governance, their structure, their services, their operations, and we think this survey, which can be done in less than an hour, is a great way to assemble some of that information and give us a great starting point. So we want to include all operating villages, every village that is open, whether it belongs to a regional, state, or county organization. Be counted. You'll end up on that list of villages, and hopefully we'll get more than 375 as we start to total up the process. So we're going to leave the data collection open and probably until December. So we have 4 months. That's a lot of hours. We're asking you to take 1 hour to fill out the survey and invest that time in yourself, in your village, in your state, your regional, and your local organization. It will help us all to grow as we move forward. So that's it.
Thank you so much, Bill. Really appreciate all of those perspectives and emphasizing the value of this project for us all. So now we're going to hear from some village leaders who were part of the pilot work to provide a few minutes of commentary about their experiences already being part of this project. So first up is we have Anita Light from Fairfax Village in the city.
Hi, everybody. Thanks, Emily. I appreciate the opportunity just to share my experience in doing the survey. It did take me about 35 minutes to do it. And most of it was just a very simple response based on my understanding of what was going on in my village, so how we're structured, what kind of services we provide to our members, how we operate. We're a parent-sponsored village here in Fairfax City, and so our budget is pretty simple to explain, and the survey allowed for us to do that. I think probably the biggest reason why I would really encourage everybody to participate, we really do believe that it's critical to have a better understanding of what's going on in villages nationwide. Being able to have that understanding really does help us share the message here in our community. I do have to agree with Bill about the advocacy issue. Our Virginia Villages Collective used a lot of the information that we collected on our Virginia villages about, the membership, the number of hours that volunteers provided, how older folks in the communities where our villages are located, how they benefited from having access to the village. And what ultimately ended up happening is we used that information to get a state grant of $400,000 to help advance existing villages in Virginia with particular projects that might be of interest to them, but also to help new developing villages. So having an understanding of what's going on nationwide is really critical. It not only helps with the advocacy issue, but also with the funding. And we have really benefited from that. Our city council is tremendously supportive of our village and has, they frequently talk about how valuable our village is here in Fairfax City. So really, truly, if you've got any questions about it, it was a simple process, and it's going to bring great value to understanding what's going on nationwide. So I'll turn it over to Suzanne now.
Thank you so much, Anita. Really appreciate it.
Hello. This is Suzanne Francis from the Village Common of Rhode Island. And I was invited to tell you about our participation in the pilots because Caroline Ganji and I collaborated with each other to complete the survey that was then in place. And I can assure you that it's been improved as a result of what happened in the pilot. And those of you who haven't had the fun of putting yours together will find it's much easier because there was good work done to simplify it as a result of the pilot experience. But how did we collaborate? Caroline and I were in the middle of a major project, a strategic project, and we had collected a great deal of data, and she happens to be pretty good at collecting it in ways that make it useful to us, not just one time, but many times. And so we agreed that we would create a Word document And she did the bulk of the work, I must say, and I'm sorry she's not here today, so I can thank her publicly. And then she circulated her version of the questionnaire to me, and I was able to fill in some answers in places that required more historical information, and I was able to provide that. Having done that, I would say she probably spent half an hour on it. She's a speedy worker, and I think she did the vast majority of the work. And I read through it once and made a couple of edits and then went back and read it a second time. But all told, I believe that we probably spent 45 minutes together. When I was asked to do this 3-minute talk, and I'm hopeful that I'm not going to exceed my time here, it occurred to me that we could have done something else. There were 2 other people who might have made the work even faster. Had we sat around a conference table with the survey, everyone having looked at it first, I think we could have completed the survey in probably less than half an hour. I don't know why it didn't occur to us, but I think we were also trying to meet a deadline. And I think the gathering a group in a conference room with one person editing and 2 or 3 or 4 people providing input at the appropriate points, I think would make it even faster. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so, so much, Suzanne. And I think we're going to go ahead and pass the mic on to Carolyn.
All right. Hello, everyone. Greetings from California. I'm really happy to be here today on behalf of Village Movement California and the 50 villages that we represent. And I'm really glad to see so many people here today. So Village Movement California originally was developed on a recommendation from the Haas School of Business at the University of California, Berkeley. And they recognized that our individual villages have very little impact when we're on our own. It was in our collective voices that we have power. So they made a recommendation to form a coalition. They also recommended that to scale our movement, we needed to partner with state government and with healthcare. And this has been the focus of much of our work at Village Movement California. As has already been said, many regional coalitions now exist across the country. And I think we share a focus of strengthening the impact, accelerating the growth, and ensuring the sustainability of the village movement in our states. So research and data collection are at the top of our priority list. Village Movement California is working to develop a value proposition to healthcare. And we recently engaged in a 2-year research collaboration with West Health Institute to explore whether collaborations between villages and healthcare systems can improve health outcomes, reduce costs, and lower the rate of hospitalizations and emergency room visits. And for those of you who are attending either our conference or the Village to Village Network conference, you're going to hear a lot more about that. So there's a conference attendance plug. But beyond that, we're now in discussion with the UC Berkeley Center for the Advanced Study of Aging Services to do an evaluation of villages in California, specifically looking at the social health impacts of village membership. And this is the center that did a lot of that initial research on villages. So the more research and data collection that all of us can do, the better. Those of us in villages, we know the power of the work that we do. We all have stories about the ways that our villages impact real people's lives in positive and transformative ways. Our attendance here shows that we recognize the importance of using data to tell our story. Data is the language of those stakeholders that we're trying to connect with. It's critical that we use our collective voices to amplify the power and the potential of the village model. And robust participation in this survey is a step in achieving this. So I thank you all for recognizing the importance of this project. I'm excited to see the launch of this survey and to see what the future holds. Thank you all.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Carolyn, and to all of our speakers for speaking exactly in their voices on the meaning of this project and their experiences. We all couldn't, we say it much better when we say it together and in concert. So thank you for demonstrating that. So we do have 7 minutes before the top of the hour, and we're also okay to go a little bit past the hour for those who need to jump off. By all means, thank you. And we'll make sure to follow up by email with there's also the links in the chat to go ahead and sign up if you'd like to go ahead and volunteer to participate. I was keeping track of some of the questions from the chat that we can go through that haven't been answered yet. Also happy to have people use the raise hand function or unmute themselves and say, excuse me, I'd like to ask a question for other things that are on people's minds. So just waiting for people to unmute and raise hands. I'm going to start going through some of the questions from the chat. So somebody asked how many questions are on the survey, and that actually isn't a straightforward question, because depending on some of the skip patterns, like you would only answer a certain set of questions if you mark yes to other questions. So for example, we have a village that says we're not offering services, but we still consider ourselves operational. You wouldn't answer any of the questions about what types of services you provide, because you've already answered a question that says you're not currently providing services. So that would skip all that section of questions. So it's more a question of like, about how long might it take to complete it than maybe about the length of the document that you'll receive. So keeping that in mind. There's another question about how are we going to provide information back to participating villages, and will the like an anonymized version of the data set be made publicly available? So this was something that our Data and Evaluation Committee discussed pretty thoroughly about information sharing and privacy and what kind of assurances. When you get the questionnaire, there's actually like 4 pages description about the project in greater detail that says like who exactly will have access to the data, how it will be shared. And villages by default will receive a PDF copy of their own responses. So you can expect to receive that back once your responses are finalized, entered. We'll create a PDF copy and email that back to you, so you have that. We will have a limited subset of fields available through public registry for villages that opt in, and that part of the project is being overseen by Village to Village Network. Things like, does your village have a membership organization? What is the primary city and state? Is it a freestanding organization, grassroots, etc.? Like some basic organizational questions that would be publicly available through the registry if villages agree. But the other information on like number of members, budget size, governance, like that will not be made publicly available. Village to Village Network will have access to that. Rutgers will have access to that. Regional leads will have access to a subset of the villages that fall under their geography. And we encourage, to leverage that information, especially through Village to Village Network, for kind of peer connection. Like there's a possibility to request, like, I'm looking for another village with XYZ. I can't see it in the public registry. You could request, can you help me find that information or help connect me? So that will be being done. And it's really kind of balancing the public good with the kind of assurances of privacy. And also another thing about making so many data fields available to the public is that it can become quickly out of date, and that information becomes old and used not in a way that we would want to necessarily. So it's a little bit of a control over data quality too. Another person asked, can we forward the survey to others? So every village will have a unique link to input their responses. And we also want to make sure that villages fully understand the context. Like, we wouldn't want hub and spoke villages to just go for it, for example. Like, we need to have a conversation about how it makes sense in that context. So we strongly encourage villages to encourage other villages to participate. You can share, kind of what the questionnaire is about or give them a sense, but we really want to be able to have villages sign up and say, like, we're ready to receive a copy of the questionnaire, and for the actual questionnaire that they fill out to come from the Rutgers team. Again, just for like version control and keeping track of everything. It's a bigger project than it was in 2016 with hundreds of villages now. So we're just trying to kind of manage and keep everything tracked properly. So definitely encourage your village peers to participate by contacting the research team and signing up through us to get the actual copy of the questionnaire. Yeah, and there was a question about should we complete the survey in a director's meeting? I thought Suzanne's commentary of how that could have worked in her case was a great example of how that could be done and can be really advantageous to facilitate dialogue, and kind of the process of going through it could build capacity and understanding that wouldn't happen necessarily if just like one person just kind of checked the box, but like whatever works best for your village is great. If you want to time completing the survey with your next director's meetings, let's say you get the survey next week, but your next director meeting isn't until September, just email us and be like, hey, we plan to work on this during the month of September. This is our target date for completing it. That way we'll know to follow up with you after that if we haven't heard back, and can just adjust our records, no problem. We give the 2-week request because we think that like that's a reasonable time to kind of put it into people's workflows. And like after 2 weeks, it just gets like gets buried in other things. So we want to keep it kind of timely. But if you need a longer time to like accommodate vacation travel or whatever, you just tell us. We're here. We're happy to receive it whenever you're ready. There was another question in the chat about villages that are out of the planning phase but not offering services. Would they be eligible to participate? 100% yes. Our data and evaluation team spoke very at length on this, and we recognize that not all villages provide services but still consider themselves operational, doing great things for their community and their participants. And so 100%, if you're a non-member village, or your village that doesn't provide services, and you say, I'm out of the planning phase and we're doing what we're doing, you would be eligible to participate. And then one last question I noted from the chat is how this relates to member surveys. So a lot of villages survey their members, right? Like do annual membership surveys to ask members to update their demographic information, or ask them what they value about being in the village, or how the perceived impact of the village. This project is not directly related to that kind of endeavor, although it seems logical that like after we do this refresh national survey, a highly plausible next step national project could be a national survey of village members, where we have kind of like a sensible questionnaire that villages across the country use to survey their members, and have some way to share that data back nationally to get a national profile of village members' survey responses. But that's not what we're doing now. So I just want to be really clear. This is an organizational survey. It's at that kind of administrative systems level, not about the individual people. We hope the questionnaire might be helpful for giving you ideas of things that other villages may be doing that maybe you would be interested in doing kind of operational wise, or areas where you would like to grow into the future as an organization. Maybe ways like counting number of members, how you count certain things that might give you ideas on how to do that more systematically, or think about that. But it wouldn't directly be questions that you would then go ahead and ask your members, because it's not about the individual members, it's really about the village as a whole. Okay, so those were the questions I grabbed from the chat, and we're a minute over the hour. So I'm going to go ahead and just ask others to unmute if there are other burning questions others noticed from the chat or want to ask. Okay, Anne Marie, I see your hand up.
Yeah, hi. I guess I just want to be clear. So if we're here, we're going to get the questionnaire, then we're supposed to complete it in about 2 weeks and send
Okay.
it back. Is
Yeah,
that what you
so-
said?
No, yeah, so
Okay.
thank you so much for asking for that clarification, because I'm sure others have the same question. So if you're here, you will receive a follow-up email from this webinar. It will have the recording from today's event. It will also have a link to an online form, the Sign Me Up form, that asks for like the name of the person, the email address, what village you're with, whether you're part of a hub and spoke, how you prefer to respond to the survey, so we can know, should we give you an email attachment, or should we make a Zoom appointment, or the timing considered. So it's like kind of like an intake, like we're interested in participating, and here's kind of some information to help us plan to complete this ask together. And from that, then the research team will email you with the version of the survey that makes sense and the timing as requested. So there's this sign up form. That's where we're starting. Eventually, we will identify villages we haven't heard from yet with this project, and we will try to recruit them into the survey. But for all of you early adopters who joined us on today's webinar, we're asking you to go ahead and fill out that online Sign Me Up form. That will be like our we work with to complete the survey. and then go from there. Does that help, Anne Marie?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thanks for asking the question. Other questions from the chat? Thank you. Let's see, yeah. Okay, so Natalie, do you want to go ahead and just share the final closing slides so we can formally wrap up, and then we can stay on afterwards for more discussion and question. All right, so yes, everybody will get a follow-up email with the materials from today and next steps, including that sign me up form. Based on those responses, we will email villages one by one with the questionnaire. Heads up, we're going to add everybody to our project email list for updates. You can always unsubscribe or opt out, but that's also another way to kind of keep in touch as the project continues with some updates on how responses are going, what we're finding, where they can learn more. Yeah, and sorry, we should have clarified. We'll see you next at the national gathering at the end of September on Zoom, where we'll provide a project update and maybe even some preliminary results if we have time. So we can go to the next slide and just say thank you to our partners at Village to Village Network, collaborating with us at the Rutgers Hub for Aging Collaboration to advance this work at the national level. And again, thank you so much. It's a wonderful sign to see such great interest in today's launch party and information session, and we can't wait to learn together. So thank you.